So funny. He's awesome.
Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Yes, I got it right. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast, number 1440. Whew, it's getting that one step closer to that magic number of 1460, which will be 4 years. And tonight, as you can see, we have Nicole back with us. Yay! And many of you may not know, but she is a functional blood work specialist. And she can look at your blood work, like she'll tell you which tests to do and all that sort of stuff, but she can read your blood work and tell you where there could be underlying causes of infections in your body that's preventing you from feeling as good as you should feel, even at times when the doctor says, oh, your blood work's normal, and you still feel like crap. So we're gonna uncrap the crap. I have no idea where that just came on, but Nicole, welcome.
Well, welcome. I'm looking forward to uncrapping the crap, Helen. That was great. And thank you so much for having me on the show. I love being on here once a month. And so thank you for having me. That was great.
Uncrapping the crap. Yeah, laughter, that one. I have.
Laughter is the best medicine, no matter what they say.
Yep. I will absolutely back that up 110%.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about blood work.
Yes, we are, because you've got the workshop coming up next Tuesday, a week from tonight, or actually a week from today at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Mm-hmm. And for those that are interested, the website is going along the bottom of the screen, but don't worry about writing it down. If you go to the description below this video, the link is there as well, for that you can just click on and go register. It is, how much is it costing them, Nicole?
Free.
Yay!
I just want to get the information out there. If somebody has their labs, they can bring labs. Even if they're like 3-4 years old, they can come and bring their labs, and we can troubleshoot some of those and put the pieces together, or at least teach them how to put the pieces together. And yeah, it's going to be a great class. I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to basically give 5 markers that you should look at that your doctor often overlooks.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm going to teach you.
That kind of sounds like that book, What Your Doctor Doesn't Know About Nutrition May Be Killing You.
That's absolutely right, too.
That was the first half of the book was really cool to read. Then the second half got too technical. I'm sort of like, I'm struggling here. Yeah. And so I gave up on the second half because it was too much tech. But the first half was the story.
It's interesting because blood work is one of those things where people go in to their doctor, whether it's once a year, once every other year, every week. Everybody's different, depending on what's going on with them, right? And so, oftentimes, people don't feel well, and they can't put a finger on it, right? Mm-hmm. They can't necessarily put a finger on what's going on. And so they go in and they get their blood work, and doctors will tell them, oh, look at everything. Oh, everything's normal. And then you'll see a couple things that are high or low. And afterwards, here's the thing. Your blood work belongs, let's start here. Your blood work belongs to you. Now, with today's technology, most people have a portal that they can go into and they can see their lab results. And so oftentimes I actually have a folder on my phone that says lab results, because a lot of people, when they're my client, they don't necessarily want, they're like, here's the portal and you just go in. So I have a lot of portals on my phone where I can just go in and look at my clients' updated blood work. So if you have a portal with, technology is great, mm-hmm. and you have the app on your phone, you can usually access all of your labs. If you don't have a portal, there are some offices that aren't using portals still, depending on parts of the country and how rural and how update they are. Yep. You can literally physically say, I want a copy of my blood work. And a lot of people don't even think to ask that because, here's the thing. When we grow up, we kind of idolize doctors, right? Like firemen, doctors, policemen, right? Like that's how the doctor knows.
I will admit I still do, because I have the utmost respect for first responders.
Of course.
My dad was one for years as a fireman, then later as a traffic cop, and then got merged with the police.
I do too,
Yeah.
and I do. I love our first responders. I love doctors that are working in the hospital saving lives. But when it comes to your everyday health, there's oftentimes that things, and I don't blame the doctors. People are like, you don't like doctors. I'm like, no, I have some very dear friends that are doctors. I
Mm-hmm.
do like doctors. I really kind of, there was to put blame, which, nobody wants to blame anything, is the medical schooling that they get. So
Oh, yeah.
what's interesting is, because I'm a nutritionist as well, that's, my first love. Um, Doctors get about 6 to 8 hours of nutrition classes in 12 years.
That reminds me of
And
this is going to date me, a cassette I was listening to of a guy who was a doctor who was talking about nutrition, and he actually went and did a separate nutrition course and got himself certified as a nutritionist, so he knew what he was talking about. He said, because to be honest, in the medical field, when you're going for your doctor's degree and all that, your class on nutrition is just how you spell, is all you learn is how to spell it. That's it.
exactly. Yeah.
And this was back in the early 90s.
At least you didn't say 8-track.
I will say I never had 8-track. I was cassette CDs.
So funny. You're like, well, back in the day, I'm going to date myself. At least you didn't say that. So yeah, when I look at blood work, this is just one that I scribbled all over. I kind of, I look at things. So here's the other thing that happens with blood work is we go in and we get this blood work, and then the doctor says everything's normal. And oftentimes people say, hey, but doc, I'm not feeling good. I have these symptoms. Well, I can give you a prescription for that.
Yeah.
Right. So all you're doing really is masking whatever is really going on. So people ask me, do I diagnose? I don't really need to diagnose. All I do is put the puzzle pieces together, which is great. So the first thing is make sure you have a copy of your blood work. Anytime you get blood work, it is yours. And ask for it. If you don't have a portal, you don't have this and a portal, make sure that you ask for a physical copy of your blood work. You shouldn't have to go back.
We learned that when Brad was in hospital for that. Well, actually, before Brad went into hospital for his first cancer surgery, we got some really good advice from a couple of oncology nurses. They said, here is your binder with all the information that you need about what you're going to be going through and everything else. And they walked us through, and they said, and this is yours to keep. And they even had like calendar pages in there as well. Nice. So you could mark in your appointments and stuff. And they said, but here's one thing. Anytime you get any blood work done, any results, any tests, any scans, anything else, ask for a physical copy. Even when you are in the hospital and they bring you in results, test results and all of that sort of stuff, ask for a physical copy.
Yeah. Because
if you go and leave the hospital and go back and ask for it, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg to get it printed.
Yeah, they'll charge you for copies. The doctor's office sometimes does, but sometimes doesn't, but it can take them weeks to print it off for you. Yeah. And so it's really important. The other thing is when you go in for your annual physical, or you go in to see the doctor if you're not feeling well, just like they put, I'm just going to put this out there verbally. I'm just going to do a little word vomit here. Just like they put these silly ads for medication on TV. You can tell how much I don't like these, right? And people go in and say, oh, I want Viagra, or I want Lipitor, or I want Crestor, or I want Prozac, because they see all these things on TV, right? And people are actually going in and telling their doctors what medication they want, which is kind of absurd because that's not how it should work. You also have the right to go in and tell your doctor what blood test that you want run.
Oh.
And so most people don't know that they can do that. Or if the doctor says, oh, I'm going to order labs, then you're allowed to speak up and say, hey, I want this done. Now, here is an interesting thing. We have a blood work. It's the most common blood work that's ever run is called a CBC, right? Complete blood count. That's what it is. And with that complete blood count, you want to make sure every doctor orders this test, that if they're ordering blood work, this is a given. Okay. But you need to make sure to ask with differential or with diff.
With diff, yeah.
with diff. And so that's what they call it. It means with differential. And so oftentimes the doctors will say, but insurance doesn't want to pay for that. You guys, it's $15 more, sometimes $8 more. So you have to be your own advocate and say, I want a CBC with differential, because that gives us so many windows into what is really going on with you when you see that differential.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to just see your white and red blood count. You want to see what's really going on with your white and red blood count, because there's so many clues in there of what is really going on. So definitely that is one blood test that you want to insist. And here's the thing, even say, I'll pay for that one out of my pocket.
What we used to do is they used to give you the paper forms to take to the labs with you. And so we would get out a black pen and check off the boxes of the tests that we wanted done as well.
Yeah. And now that everything's computerized pretty much.
It's a little difficult to do that.
So people often ask me, like, what blood tests are important? What is really important, right?
That's a good question. If you want to get blood work done and you want to request, what do you request?
What do you request? So you want a CBC with diff or differential. Super, super important, right? You want a metabolic panel, and that's really important as well. So metabolic panel. You want a lipid panel. The lipid panel is going to tell you your cholesterol.
Okay.
You want to know what's going on with cholesterol. Now, here's where things get tricky. Those three things, they'll usually run, right? And so, but there's a little bit more that you should ask for. Some doctors will do it, and some will say, oh, no. Or they'll say, you have to go to a specialist to get this. But you want to be insistent. So here's what you want to also ask for. You want to ask for a thyroid panel.
Ah.
You also want to ask for an iron panel. And we want to make sure that, so sometimes it's included in the metabolic panel, but sometimes it's not. We want to know your blood glucose level and your A1C, because your blood glucose tells us what your sugars are in your body. And the A1C tells us if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. And that's super important, especially with our diets here in the United States, is to know what is your glucose level? How is your body processing sugars?
I thought the A1C, now I might be getting it confused with something else. I thought the A1C was something to do with the heart.
No, that's the HSCRP is probably what you're thinking. They kind of rhyme. The A1C is all about cholesterol.
Okay.
I mean, it's all about your blood sugar levels.
Yeah. Got it.
If you're diabetic.
See, I get confused.
And then the last one, which is a super gem. This is a super gem. You want to know what your vitamin D levels are.
Yes.
And it is actually called OH-25. Yeah. So those are, like, in the perfect world, those would be if you could go in and ask your doctor for these tests. This is going to give you a map of everything that's really going on in your body. Now, there's a lot of specialized tests, like, if you have cancer, they're testing your cancer markers. If you have,
CA levels, I remember those.
Right. If you have kidney disease, they're obviously going to be doing more, creatinine and that, like really more specialized testing.
This is just bringing back memories, all the stuff that Brad had to go through, because he had the creatines done as well because of the kidney problems.
Because of the kidneys. And so, we just want these basic tests that give us a blueprint of what's going on with you. And these should be ordered, like if you're having an annual exam, you should be asking for these once a year. You should know what's going on inside you. It's like getting, it's like having an x-ray done that we often do, or having an ultrasound or any kind of testing to see what's going on. Our blood work gives us so many clues of what's going on. And at the functional level, we look at things really different than a doctor. So people will say, I'll give you an example for vitamin D. Vitamin D can go from 0 to 100. Okay.
Is that the normal range?
The normal range is the normal range they say is 30 to 100.
Okay.
I like that. They say that. But in the functional world and in the functional medicine world, we honestly know through years and years of documentation that for somebody to feel their ultimate best, their vitamin D should be at least 70. I prefer to see 80 to 100. We want it on the upper scale.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't even know how vitamin D works. They just think, oh, we're going to go outside and we're going to get vitamin D, right? We're going to get the vitamin D that we need. Most foods do not contain vitamin D. Mushrooms actually are the only vegetable that contain vitamin D.
Oh, good, because I like mushrooms.
Yeah, mushrooms, they have lots of vitamin D in them. And so, and all mushrooms, all different varieties of mushrooms have vitamin D in them, which is great. So people think they can go out in the sun and they're just going to absorb all the vitamin D that they need. But they don't factor in all the things that are going on in our world. The ozone layer, climate change. And you know what a big one is? We should be doing this every time we go outside. And I'm a prime example. I can certainly attest to this because I look a little pink today. Right? I really got some ultraviolet rays a week ago and I'm still pink. So sunscreen blocks vitamin D.
Well, that's good because I don't wear any.
Well,
I hate putting on sunscreen. I hate the way it feels, on my skin or something. It doesn't matter what type of sunscreen it is. So when I take Zephy for her walks in the morning or in the evenings, we're only outside for that short amount of time. And we've got a park just down the street. So a lot of our trails that we're walking are in the shade.
Well, I went to a 4th of July parade. And unfortunately, I did burn. So, and which is not good for your skin, guys. So most people do wear sunscreen, especially if they're out and about and for hours in the day out in the sunshine. But it really does block our vitamin D. So a lot of people think that they're getting all this extra vitamin D because they're out there in the sun, they're out there doing all this stuff. But really, it's that vitamin D isn't even getting into them. But here's what vitamin D does. So somebody was to, ask me what vitamin D does. Do you ever have just somebody give you a big hug and it just makes you feel good?
Oh, yeah. I miss hugs.
A big hug. COVID killed me because I am a hugger. Like people need people and people need human contact. And a hug can be one of the most healing things out there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're just literally good for our soul. Like,
yep,
I
absolutely.
believe hugs are just
totally
really
agree.
Good for our heart.
You won't get any arguments with me on that one.
So vitamin D is like giving your inside a hug.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's really, so vitamin D is super important in building our cholesterol, which we need cholesterol. So we need cholesterol for our bodies to run, good cholesterol.
Yep.
And vitamin D supports the cholesterol level, but it also calms our immune system down. So if we have any little thing going on in our body, our immune system responds. And without enough vitamin D,
yep,
it can kind of go wackadoodle at times. And so, love my medical terms here, wackadoodle. And
well, we're talking about uncrapping the crap, so
right,
that's our medical term as well.
And so, vitamin D is it's such a support for your immune system, and it really is like giving your insides a hug.
Do you want to know a really good fact about hugs?
Yeah.
Okay. And I am so depleted on this right now, but we need 4 hugs a day for survival. We need 8 hugs a day for maintenance, and we need 12 hugs a day for growth.
You better get out there and hug.
I actually told somebody, I was at a conference one time and I told somebody that, and she just suddenly wraps her arms around me, gives this big hug and goes, 1, and runs off, and you can hear her counting as she's running around while everybody's outside waiting for the doors to open, hugging everybody that she can, and they go, and she goes, why are you counting? Somebody says, why are you counting? She says, well, Helen told me I need 12 hugs a day for growth, so I'm getting my 12 hugs plus in.
Well, you need at least 5,000 IUs of vitamin D3 every day too. And if you're not feeling well, then I actually bump that up with my clients. So for short periods of time. So everybody needs a good hug and everybody needs D3. I've only seen one of hundreds of blood works that I have looked at. I've only seen one person with vitamin D over 70. One, and I live in Southern California.
Wow.
So, and I see people all over the country now and in Canada, but one out of hundreds had an ideal. And that was actually the day before yesterday. It was the first one I had ever seen. My oldest daughter's is actually like in the high 50s, which hers is the second highest I've ever seen. Most people are under 50. So, yeah. So
yeah, I probably am too. I was looking for my D3, but oh, there it is.
I said, the blood work just gives us so many clues, and those underlying infections that doctors don't look at because their scale is just so big.
Yeah.
And when we put it down at the functional level, we can look and go, okay, so I'll just give you an example is I have a client that just is exhausted all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 24 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's exhausted. And, his parents have been on him. Like, at first they were like, is he being lazy? Because that's the first thing you think when a 24-year-old is like, hanging out on the couch. But then they realized over this pattern, he's getting enough sleep. He eats pretty decently for a 24-year-old. He still lives at home, so mom's still cooking for him. And and he's not a big partier. So, does he party once in a while? Yes, but he's not a big partier. So it's not like he's going out night after night clubbing and doing all of that. So, and he did his blood work, and his doctor literally just didn't look at a lot of things that were going on. So the first thing I saw when I picked up his blood work, it was screaming at me. And I went, you have an underlying infection. And here's the thing, when you have infections, it causes depression, stomach issues. Like there's so many things that infections do and accumulate in your body that you don't realize that are affecting your well-being, your sleep, your sex drive. If you have a low-grade infection, your sex drive will go down the drain, right? So if you're in a relationship, you don't want your sex drive to be like this. You want it to be like this, right?
Yeah.
So and this 24-year-old, he was literally telling me he has no sex drive at 24. Now that's pretty uncommon for a young man, right? So I picked up his blood work and I said, oh my goodness, you have an infection. He says, well, my doctor hasn't told me that. I said, well, let's keep going through it. So I look enough and I see that he has, so we have 5 parts that are part of our blood, our red blood count. And these are technical terms now, guys. These are medical terms. We have neutrophils, which fight off bacteria. We have lymphocytes, which fight off our viruses. We have monocytes, which fight off a different type of virus. We have eosinophils and basophils, and those fight off parasites because we all have parasites. So we all have good bugs and bad bugs. So, we need those. Those are the things that work in our blood. So when I looked at this, I went, oh my goodness. And I said to him, have you ever had, and he had only given me part of his blood work, right? Because he didn't want to overwhelm me, which I thought was So I said to him,
overwhelm Nicole with your blood work.
Right. Can't do that. So it's fascinating to me, the puzzle. So I looked right at him and I said, did you have mono? He's like, I did. I said, you didn't ever have the Epstein-Barr virus, have you? He's like, yes. How do you know that? Because all he had given me was his white and red blood counts. So he says, I did have the Epstein-Barr virus. I have that blood work. Let me send it over to you. Well, he had Epstein-Barr 5 years prior.
Wow, and it was still affecting his body?
It's still, yeah. So I was like, you still have this underlying infection. And he was absolutely shocked that just by looking at this one page of his blood work, I called out on him like, did you have this? Because your blood work is like literally jumping off the page, screaming at me because that one number was so high. And he says, my doctor never said anything about it afterwards. And I was like, well, look, if we get rid of this underlying infection, you're going to feel so much better. You're going to get your energy level back up because it's just zapping you. Like it's literally zapping his energy from him because his body's constantly trying to get around, around this little virus. So easy, 2 months, month to 2 months on the right supplements, and that virus will dissipate and go away.
That's awesome.
So, but his mom was like, like she ended up calling me because she was like, how did you know this? And I said, because the blood work doesn't lie. We just look at things on a smaller scale in the functional world, and the blood work is what it is, right? Whether, and I don't ever say there's bad blood work or good blood work. Sometimes our blood work is off and we need to address it. But, we also need to know what those numbers are. So that's why I'm doing the class on Tuesday, is because I want people at least to be able to read their white and red blood counts and know exactly what's going on with them. I think it's super important that we know how to read it kind of more at the functional level. So then we can say whether we go to a doctor or a homeopathic person or, whoever's treating you, and say, look, this is what I think is going on. Because oftentimes we don't know.
Yeah.
Often, like this poor kid at 24, he had no idea why he was exhausted, on a continual basis for about the last 4 years. And yeah. And his parents honestly labeled him as lazy because all he wants to do is sleep.
Sometimes I just want to sleep as well.
There's sometimes I want to sleep too.
Yeah, my brain just gets to a point, it's sort of like, I'm done.
It's amazing that one little marker in your blood can tell you, guess what? There's a reason you want to sleep all the time, right?
No, not all the time. Just sometimes my brain will get to the end. Like if I'm getting towards the end of the workday, my brain just goes like tonight when I was getting towards the end of the thing, my brain says, I was actually going to go get my mail. And my brain goes, no, we're done.
Get your mail tomorrow.
And so it's like, oh, okay, I guess I better go take a nap now so I can be awake for Nicole tonight.
So, well, I'm so excited about doing this course, and I really think it's so important. Like I said, know what your levels are. Know that what your vitamin D levels are too, because that plays such a big role in that. Now you have a list of what blood work you should ask your doctor for.
There's a lot there.
And to be able to ask and know that it's okay to ask. I think that's a big thing too, is it's okay to ask for your records. Matter of fact, it's really important that you do ask.
Yes.
And if you can go in and certainly ask for a prescription, which so many Americans do, you can certainly go in and ask to have blood work done.
I just remember when you're going through some of these panels and things that, to ask for, I know that Brad had a lot of these done continually because of his cancer at the time.
Yeah.
And we were always getting like full blood work done for this, that, and the other thing. And before he had surgery and had any surgery, I can't speak to any surgeries, he had to go in and do the pre-op stuff, in which they did a complete blood work on everything, which included all of this stuff that we've got here.
So oftentimes they won't, like regular doctors won't do a thyroid panel. They'll say you need to go, there's nothing wrong with your thyroid. There's nothing wrong with your thyroid. You don't need that test done. And a hormone panel, oftentimes they'll say, oh, you need to go to, especially women, your OBGYN. Yeah, to get a hormone panel. So
can you skip the doctor completely and just show up at the lab and go, I want blood work done, and these are the tests I want done?
Not usually. If you can find a practitioner, like myself, I can order blood work for people. So sometimes chiropractors or naturopaths, they can order. It depends on what ability they have. So in my case, yes, I can order blood work for people and have them go in and do it. And then they can always bill their insurance as well as a super bill. So they have to pay up front for it. But the good news is they can get what they want, which is really nice, and then they just get reimbursed from it. And these tests that I'm talking about aren't thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So, they bill the insurance thousands of dollars, but I know what the cost is because I can order blood work. So, and so it's not like the tests that I told you, they're not specialty tests. And so you can have all of that done for, if you include the hormone test, it runs around 500. If you don't include the hormones, it's about $250.
That's not bad.
So it's not bad at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's this
actually quite reasonable when you consider what they're doing.
Yeah. And so when you think, like I said, the difference between a CBC and a CBC with differential is usually $8 to $15 difference.
Yeah.
And so, but that differential is super important. And here's an example. My mother-in-law's doctor, unfortunately, she's with, I guess I could say it, she's with Kaiser, and they will not, her insurance with being on Medicare only pays X amount of dollars for blood work, unless you have something wrong with you. Well, like really wrong with you. And, like in your case with Bradley, who was sick. So she has a few little things, but for 87 years old, this is a woman who works 3 days a week, and she's overall pretty darn healthy. Right. So they're like, we don't need to order that.
Yeah.
And they absolutely refuse to order it because they're like, we don't know if your insurance will pay for it. And so, because she doesn't really have any diagnoses, but I'm like, okay, but how do you know if anything's wrong with her if you don't have the proper blood work?
Yeah.
Right. It's one of those things, but her office absolutely will not order that test.
Interesting.
And so it does happen. So that's when you need to find somebody who can order that test for you and make sure, because that is the one test that's almost like mandatory is CBC with differential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brad got a lot of those done because I would go down and I'd look at all his electrolytes and I knew if you put a blood test in front of me now, I might remember what they told me to look for.
Right.
But I definitely knew about the red blood count, the white blood count and all of that sort of thing. The CEAs was always on there as well, and how to read those. And what was the other one we had to look at? I'd have to go back through my notes because I've got, a binder like this with all of his in fact, I have all of his medical records on a CD.
I don't think you necessarily need those anymore, Helen.
Yeah, but they're in boxes. We just moved. They're all in boxes.
I know.
But it's kind of interesting to go back and have a look because the CD has everything, all of his entire medical record on there,
wow,
including all the scans, all the X-rays, all the PET scans, the CT scans, any type of scan he had done, any of the surgical notes, all the doctor visit notes, all the date especially when he was in hospital for 87 days, any tests that they ran, it's all on there.
It's really good.
It cost me like $14 to get the whole thing on CD.
That's good. And like I said, now there's portals. And so with the portals, it's really nice because most everything's in there.
Yeah, they cut his portal off as soon as I told them that I think I had, because I called up the palliative care people to let them know that Brad had passed. And within 2 days, his portal was disabled.
Yeah.
I couldn't even get in there.
So as long as you're alive, it's great to have access to that portal, and more places are doing it. But if not, you guys don't be afraid to ask for copies of your scans, of blood work, of anything that you have done, because you never know if you're going to move state or you're going to change insurances or you're going to change doctors or anything. You want a record of what's going on with your health. Super important. So,
and also knowing if any of the health things that you have are hereditary.
That is true.
Yes.
There are things that are hereditary. Here's what we know with DNA, though. Just because you are predisposed for something
doesn't mean you're going to get it.
Doesn't mean you're going to get it. And there's ways, if we know what you're predisposed for, we can actually turn that gene off. So it's like turning on a stove and turning it off. So we are learning more and more and more about medicine every day. And I think the best advice that was ever given to me was the doctor who actually got me down into the holistic wellness world. I was in a coma for 4.5 months back in 2002. And when I woke up, I had the best advice from a doctor ever. And I live by this every single day. So I'm going to give you His advice to me, to all of you today, the first thing I said to him is, what do I need to do to live? I have teenagers at home. And he said, the first thing, if you ever want to get better, no matter what's going on with you, whatever your faith is, he says, and this is honestly what I said, I don't care if you pray to a damn rock. He says, or your cat, or God, or Buddha, or whoever your belief system is, but whatever your belief system is, I want you to magnify that by 10. And once you've done that, and you're settled, like you have magnified whatever faith is that you know you're going to get better, then I need you to magnify that by 100.
That's awesome.
And he says, because you need faith and belief that you are going to get better. The first thing about getting better is in here.
Mm-hmm.
He says, the second thing you need is you need me. And he says, and I'm not saying that to be cocky, but you have something rare going on in your life. You have toxic mold growing in your lungs. Very, very, very rare. You know, like this is something extremely rare. And so I have put together a medical team around the country, and we are all trying to rack our brains of people that I know around the country, trying to figure out how to get this darn mold out of your lungs. Right.
Wow.
And so you do need doctors. And he says, here's what you need. He says, you don't need doctors that are cocky and believe that they're godlike.
Mm-hmm.
There are many of them out there that are, because they're very educated. He says, but the other part is you need to have a doctor who is humble enough to remember that we are practicing medicine, because we don't have all the answers. But if you find a doctor who's willing to start searching for those answers, because I've never left your side, this is an example, then the chances of you getting better and healing are even bigger. So always choose doctors that are humble enough to remember that they're practicing medicine, and you can fire your doctor.
Yes, you can.
And so he says, you do not have to go to that doctor. You can choose a different doctor. So always with your medical doctors, that's the number 2 thing. And the number 3 thing is you need to combine Western and alternative medicines.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's super important, especially in the preventative world. So in your case, we are going to look at everything of what can contribute to mold and how do we get this mold out of your body. So instead of going to physical therapy, would you consider going to yoga? Because I'd been in bed for 4.5 months, not moving my muscles, right? Yep. And his wife, who was she was almost 70 at the time, would come and get me 4 days a week. And I would sit in the back of yoga class and literally just stretch, because that was about my ability at that point. Right. And so she brought me into the yoga world. We used a nutritionist who we went through, and she says, okay, never had this before, but let's put our brains together. What food, I know what foods attract mold of any kind. So we're going to cut those out of your diet for right now, because we don't want to add any more any mold exposure into your body. Right. And anything that causes inflammation, we're going to pull out of your diet for right now, because you are so inflamed. We need to take all the inflammatory foods out. So I worked with a nutritionist. And then my big one, and I think this is where my healing finally began, was he put me in with, and it was very controversial at the time. Now it's not, you guys, but back then, this was 20 years ago, it was experimental. So he put me in a hyperbaric chamber 5 days a week, 2 days off, 5 days on, 2 days off. And we did that for 2 months. So
I don't know if I could stand any time in those things, because they're so confined.
It was the one I was in was like a big sleeping bag, like a blow up sleeping bag. And so it had windows all over it. And I had a little buzzer that I could buzz the nurse if I needed anything. And I would just wear headsets and listen to music. And sometimes it felt so good and relaxing, I would just sleep, because you're just getting pure oxygen into your body. Mm-hmm. But we were trying to put enough oxygen in there to kill off this mold that was growing in my lungs, and for me to breathe in this pure oxygen. So he's the one who actually got me into the alternative health field. And my promise to him was I was always going to share his words of wisdom with everybody. So that really is why I got into my business. He truly saved my life, and I saw the benefit of all these different things that could really help people. But yes, we still do need doctors. And let me tell you, if my spleen was rupturing, I'd be at the ER. If I was in a car accident, I'd be at the ER. If my appendicitis ruptured, my appendix, I'd be at the ER. So, I'm definitely not anti-doctor, but we just have to remember to choose the ones who listen to us and who remember that they're working for us and that they need to be humble and work for us and not just write us prescriptions to mask a symptom that could easily be taken care of, because an antibiotic clearly in this young boy's life wasn't enough, where he was still 5 years later suffering from a virus all this time that was just never taken care of because one prescription was written for an antibiotic and that's all he was ever given.
Ooh. The first thing I always tell my doc whenever I get a new doctor, and the first thing I always tell them, I says, right, I just want to let you know up front, is that I will not take any medication unless it is absolutely required.
Yeah.
I don't want anything that masks symptoms. I want things that are going to cure whatever the problem is.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell them. And I said, if you try, and I said, and I will look up the medications before I even go and get the prescriptions filled. So.
Well, I wrote a big long thing about a prescription the other day on my Facebook. I don't know if you saw it, but if you have a chance, go take a look at it.
Yeah.
And my logo on there is "Be Drug Free."
Yeah. And I've had 2 doctors since I've been here in the States that have both turned around to me, and when I've told them that, and said to me, they said to me, I don't prescribe medication unless it is absolutely required. And I said, good, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And they were willing to listen to, well, if I take this supplement, will that help?
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's really good. Because oftentimes, we get the ones that are so busy and they have their prescription pads on top of your file. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but a lot of doctors will walk into the room with their prescription pad on, well, now they're going more digital, or they'll bring in the computer and they're ready to write a prescription before they even hear what's going on with you.
Yeah. All the ones I've had, these prescription pads been in their pocket.
Yeah. So, but I have seen that over and over again. And so, because I do go to the doctor with clients at times. And so I've seen it time and time again where here it is, but now they don't have prescription pads so much anymore. Everything's done digitized, but it's like their computer is ready to go and they're just typing in like what prescriptions they're going to give a client before the client.
Most of them have the computer things all set up there in the exam room. They just log in. There's all your information. There's all your test results and all of that. And then they're like, oh, click on this button, type the prescription out, and you'll get it at the front desk when you walk out.
Yeah. And now they don't even do that half the time. They just send it right to the pharmacy. They don't even give you a copy of it.
I always ask for a copy of it.
Yeah.
Because I want to research it before I go fill it.
There you go. But yeah. Oh, and see, that's a good note too. You guys, if you get a prescription, please, do your homework and know what are the side effects, what are the long-term effects, what are the short-term effects, and there's a lot of studies out there that you can actually look online, and get a lot of answers before you start taking something that you might not actually need. So anybody can go on my Facebook and read about statins and you'll get an earful, because I went on because I read an article the other day. And it was an article about DNA, well, basically how they were using DNA. Well, so, for me, DNA fascinates me, right? Bloodwork fascinates me.
DNA fascinates me, but from a different perspective than you.
Right. But DNA is so fascinating in itself on all realms. And so I started reading this article, and I believe it was in the Washington Journal or one of those, right? And the more I read it, the more angry I got. And so I was like, wait, this is not what I was expecting to read. And so basically it was talking about statins, which is given to people for high cholesterol. Okay. Now, oftentimes if you have high cholesterol, it's not because of the food you eat. Sometimes it is, but there's other reasons that cholesterol can be high, and doctors kind of dismiss that. If you've had any kind of heart problems at all, even if you don't have high cholesterol, they give you this prescription. So there are over 10 million, over 10 million of this prescription written in the US every year.
What?
Yes. 10 million people take this prescription every year, and that number is growing every year, more and more and more. And so one of the things it was talking about is oftentimes when people take a statin, their muscles hurt, especially in their arms and their legs. And so in the article, it goes on to tell you about 30% of the people have muscle aches when they take this prescription. 30%. Now, I don't know
That's a
about
lot.
you, but if you have 10 million people that are taking a prescription that they may or may not need, because they may not even have cholesterol issues, so they may or may not have this issue, and you take 30% of 10 million, that is 3.3 million people that are having sore muscles. Well, I don't know about you, but when you have sore muscles, how productive are you?
Not.
And how does that productivity lead into your everyday life, right? 30%. Now that's a big number. But then it goes on to talk about the 1% that have the muscle pain is so bad that they can't get out of bed or they can't lift their leg to go on a curb, which is exactly what had happened to my ex-husband. So they gave him a statin, and he literally couldn't get out of bed. And again, I'm the one who was frustrated with him, like, what's going on with you? And I thought he was milking being sick, honestly, because he was being a big baby, but he was in so much pain. And then I realized how much pain he really was in. He could not get up and down our stairs. And he had only been taking this drug for like 4 or 5 days. And
wow.
It was bad. And he couldn't lift his legs to get to go down the stair. So he was like literally stuck upstairs because he couldn't get downstairs. And so, in the first couple of days, like I said, I really thought he was, milking the system a little bit. Honey, can you bring me, this food and that? Because when you're not feeling good, right? But then I realized that there's really a problem, and he really couldn't get down the stairs. He could not move his legs. So I got him into the doctor's office, and they said, well, we'll just put him on a lower dose. And I said, you're going to take him off of that medication right now. Like he's not. And they're like, well, if he doesn't take it, he could die within a year. I said, my husband does not have high cholesterol. Oh, I'll take that chance. And so and here's the thing. I mean, we've been divorced for, I don't know, since 2009. So he's still kicking. I do talk to him from time to time. And so we don't have a hateful relationship, which is nice. And so we're just not married any longer. And he comes to me for all of his health advocacy because he knows exactly, the things that he went through when he had a situation. So I went on a rampage and I wrote a big old thing on Facebook about this because 1%, you guys, is 100,000 people in America can't move their legs or arms enough to go up and down stairs because of this thing. And they're like, well, it's just a small percentage of people. No, 100,000 people is a lot of people. I lived in a town with 248 people. There are people that have towns of only 2,000 people, right? So, I mean, stadiums don't usually hold 100,000 people. Huge football stadiums only hold 50 to 60,000 people. And look how many
are a bit bigger than that.
Right. But look at how big that is, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of people. Hello, there's that many people that can't move and you're still giving this prescription out. So I'm like, no, let's say no let's be drug free unless we absolutely need to have medications on us. Boy, you got me on a soapbox going on.
Well, I'll have to go and look up the name of the antibiotic that they put me on when I had blockages in my saliva gland here. And it was just this hard lump. And to get it to reduce down, because I didn't realize how life-threatening it was. Mm-hmm. And so I went to pick up the prescription, and I didn't have time between there and then to do the research. But they give you the information sheets. Mm-hmm. And so before I even take any medication, I read those sheets. This one was talking about if you've got tenosynovitis or tendonitis or carpal tunnel or any tendon issues, do not take this medication because it could cause ruptures in the tendons. And I'm sitting there going, I have tennis elbow, I have carpal tunnel, I have tenosynovitis, I have tendonitis. I ain't taking this drug at all. And so I got on the phone with my doctor and said, the specialist prescribed this antibiotic for me, but didn't even ask if I had any of these ailments that it could affect. I says, I'm not even going to risk taking it because I don't want my tendons are very tender as they are. I don't want to rupture them. And so she totally agreed and said, I'll get onto the specialist. And so they end up giving me a different antibiotic. that wouldn't have that effect. And I said, those sort of things, if you've got, they need to warn you about those before they prescribe them. Because if you turn around and say, hey, I'm not taking that because of these issues that I have. And it's not just in one wrist. I have tendonitis and carpal tunnel in my left hand as well. So that's a lot of tendons to get ruptured. They're already tender enough as they are. So it's educate yourself. Just don't blindly take drugs because doctors say you need them. Yeah. Ask questions.
Yeah. Ask the
You want to know about drug interactions. You want to know about what side effects are these going to have. I mean, I would pepper, because when Brad was looking at having biological drugs to control his psoriasis, I would, and this was after he had been first round of cancer. One of the things I noticed on one of the biologicals was that it can cause lymphoma. So my concern was his immune system is already weakened enough because of the cancer. Is there a chance of the cancer coming back? Is there a chance of him getting another? What are the chances of his cancer coming back? What are the chances of him getting a different type of cancer because he's already had cancer and he's got a compromised immune system? And this one, strips the immune system. And so I had a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. And the doctor said, "Oh, you don't need to worry about that." Blah 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 blah. Yeah, well, his cancer came back. And but the way we knew is he started taking one of the biologicals, and his CA levels suddenly shot up. And the doctor was like, "Oh, we need to go and we need to do these PET scans." And the oncologist was on. And after the scans came back completely normal, he was really puzzled. And I turned around and I said, "I think you might find that he was put on this particular drug, and this is the issue. And he has only been on that drug a week when you took his CA levels, and they went through the roof. They were perfectly fine the couple of months beforehand, but when you took it after being on this thing for 5 days, oh no, there's no interaction, blah 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 blah." And this doctor was a bit pompous. He would sit there, one visitor chair here, and in between was a mirror, and he would sit there. And he had no hair to fiddle with anyway, but he would sit there and adjust everything and just look at his mirror. He wouldn't even look at us when he was talking to us. It was, yeah. And so then the next time we went in and we did the CA levels again, the numbers were up even higher. And he turns around and says, "Well, I was talking with the rheumatoid arthritis specialist the other day, and he said there is written documentation that the drug can affect the CEA levels. So we're going to take you off them and see what happens." And he made it sound like it was his idea and it was his thought that maybe it was the Humira that he was on.
Ego should not play a part in medical care.
Yeah, I was glad when we moved down to San Diego and got a whole new team. And so then he was wanting to run all these other tests and everything else. And I'm so like, no. I said, why? I said, that the scans are clear. And as soon as we took him off the Humira, his CA levels started dropping.
Interesting.
Yes. And because I didn't have a medical degree, but I saw cause and effect, you started taking this happened.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And usually, you guys, if you have a drug interaction, it's usually within the first 3 days. And sometimes it's not right away. So you need to know that. So sometimes if you're allergic to a drug, you're going to have a reaction right away.
Yeah.
Right. If you're allergic. But there are side effects that will happen 2, 3, 4 days afterwards that you need to pay attention to. So if you're taking something that really 2 days later, 3 days later, you're seeing some odd side effects, you need to call your doctor immediately and let them know what those side effects are. So you can do some of your own homework and read those things that they give you at the, to see if any of those things fit the medication, or Google, Dr. Google will tell us so much. Just don't go down the Dr. Google road, because you can get all kinds of misinformation. But when it comes to a drug, you can go on and say, okay, what is penicillin side effects, or what is Zoloft side effects, or what are, and if you're feeling any of those things, that's when you need to contact your doctor, because not every drug is for every person, and you can have interactions. And we want to make sure that, in Bradley's case, they were affecting his cancer markers. And so, and throwing red flags everywhere, because a lot of people might not know what that is. I'm
sorry. Yes. CA levels are the ones that they use for the cancer markers. And there's different numbers mean different types of cancer.
So it's cancer markers. You want your CEA under 4.7 to be cancer free. We all have cancer cells in our body, but you don't want it to be above 4.7, because then we know that there is an active cancer growing into your body somewhere. So
well,
that's what
my red marker is that after his surgery to remove the cancer tumors out of his body, after he had the lower interior resectional, I think it was called, his cancer went from 42, as CA levels went from 42 down to 2.5, and they stayed there until he started taking the Humira.
Yeah.
And it was 2.5 for almost 6 years.
The Humira was the trigger.
And Humira was the trigger. And I even said to his doctor, who happened to be one of the top oncologists in the US for colorectal cancer, I said to him, I says, when you get some chance, can you just kind of just do a little test to see how biological drugs that they use for like psoriasis and stuff, especially the Humira, may affect the CEA levels and may even trigger the cancers coming back. And he looked at me and he says, and he's sort of like standing, this doctor was awesome. We loved our doctor, his oncologist in San Diego. He just stands there and leans against the wall and he's looking at Brad, and Brad's sort of like, are you sizing me up for a test tube? My husband was 6'5" and 350 pounds. And he's asking the doctor if he was being sized up for a test tube, because that's the look that the doctor was giving me. And the doctor said, that's an interesting thing, and asked me why I thought that. And so I explained it all to him, and he's sort of like, yeah, there could be a possibility there. So he didn't rubbish it. He didn't say no. He may have been brushing me off, but he did it in a way that I believed that he was actually going to seriously consider it.
Right. That's good.
Yeah. And so whether they actually test for it or not, I don't know, but cause and effect.
Exactly. Cause and effect.
The CA levels started going wackadoodle. And his CA levels were up near 1,000.
Wow.
He was at 42 when he was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And went down to 2.5. The Humira pushed it
up.
And the Humira pushed it up to almost 1,000, which meant he should have been dead.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, it's time for us to get out of here.
Blood mark, that just goes to circle back around how important blood markers are, because we can look at blood markers and see exactly what's going on with you. And so it's all part of the puzzle. So Helen, thank you so much. We went an hour today.
We did that. We went over an hour with the food labels last time.
I know, we
had another hot button with the blood work.
I know, I like pushing the hot buttons once a month with you guys. So, and if you have any questions, you guys can look me up on Facebook. You can go to the Bloodwork. And here's the thing, if you can't go to the Bloodwork workshop and you're interested, register anyways, because I will send out a replay to those people who weren't able to attend.
Awesome. Yes. Because I'm working at that time, so I'm going to go register now.
And
if you'd like to register, click the link below in the description. It is rolling across the top of the screen here, but it's a very long one. So go to the description here and click the link that will be there. And so you can go and register for it. So even if you can't attend, you can get the recording, because your health, if you can have all the money in the world, all the time in the world, but if you don't have your health sorted out and are at the optimal in your health, how can you live your best life now? And that's what we're all about, is learning to live our best life now, which is why we bring somebody like Nicole on to help us live our best life now by addressing health issues and helping us live healthy so we can live our best life now. So that's it from us for today. Nicole, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you so much, Helen.
Yeah, and the workshop is on Tuesday, July
18th.
18th. It's a week from today, at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here at 6 p.m. tomorrow, 6 p.m. Pacific tomorrow evening. Hey, konera.